What's going on YouTube? It's TH back again with another video, and today we're going to kickstart our regrade and redraft series here on the channel, starting with the 2022 NFL Draft. We'll do 2022, 2021, and then 2020, and then if these videos do well, and it seems like you guys are enjoying them, we may even go back to 2019, 2018, and maybe even a few other drafts. This is a draft-focused channel, so I figured this would be a fun idea to kind of reevaluate these draft classes. Now, granted, I do want to start by saying, especially this 2022 class, we've only seen them play 1 year, so there is a lot to still be figured out, so I'll still be kind of rather generous with these grades because there's still potential to mine with a lot of these guys. But let me hear your thoughts down below on your favorite team's 2022 draft class, how you're feeling about it more than a year ago now, or with more than a year past now. But hopefully you guys enjoy. Be sure to hit that like button if you do. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, want to see more football content. So let's go ahead and start with the Arizona Cardinals. And yeah, no first rounder this year. They gave up the first for Hollywood Brown. And then it's, Cam Thomas, Trey McBride, Najee Sanders. Yeah, it wasn't a class that I was super crazy about to begin with. McBride, I guess, is fine. And then Cam Thomas, Najee Sanders. Feels like one of those two guys can at least be competent. I'm still excited to see what Cam Thomas looks like, considering he was a guy that, if he didn't get hurt at the Senior Bowl, who knows? Maybe he's a late first rounder. So I'm really excited about Thomas. And then we'll see about Najee Sanders. Really good athlete, good frame. Just never felt like he fully maximized that at Cincinnati. So in retrospect, I can't even remember what I gave this this class. I'll go C right now because it looks like, with McBride he could be okay, and then one of those two edge guys could become a starter. But the rest of the way, I'm not really crazy about a whole lot that Arizona did. And then I'm not accounting for the first rounder becoming Hollywood Brown, but if you want to, go ahead and let me know how that would change your grade down below. Then we get to Atlanta. Love the Drake London selection. First wide receiver off the board. Arnold Ebiketie felt like great value. Troy Anderson's a player I'm really excited about because, twitched up athlete, played so many different positions. I'm excited to see what he looks like. And then Desmond Ridder, we'll really find out what he is this year. Tyler Algier runs for 1,000 yards as a 5th round pick. D'Angelo Malone, solid edge rusher in the, kind of as the DPR specialist. So, this year will kind of dictate what grade this class gets long term, right? Because if Ritter's better than we expect, this is going to be a potential A level grade, right? Like, if a 3rd round quarterback works out, like, kind of hard not to give you an A. Plus, you get wide receiver 1 and Drake London. And it's kind of funny. The Falcons are just building a basketball, team. Them and the Chargers just feel like they're going for height first and foremost in the wide receiver room for Atlanta. If you include Kyle Pitts in that mix, it's Pitts, Mac Hollins, and then Drake London. So it's kind of fun to think about. But man, I'll go B+. B+ with the potential to move into an A, depending on how Redder looks this upcoming season. Then we get to the Baltimore Ravens, and this team, I love this draft class for Baltimore. If my memory serves, I gave this an A because they addressed all of their major needs in free agency and just got a sober look at the board. So when Kyle Hamilton fell to them at 14, they were like, this is BPA. When Tyler Linderbaum made it to them at 25, it was BPA. So those were both A picks for me. David Ojabo coming off an injury, but you know what? There's no reason he should be in here in the 2nd round if not for that injury. So let's make that pick here. Travis Jones was one of the biggest steals of the draft, in my opinion, in the 3rd round. Jalen Armour-Davis, I could see him maybe even becoming the starter. I was just talking about in yesterday's video, or in Friday's video rather, the power rankings, I was like, that other corner spot, we'll have to wait and see. But I could see Jalen Armour-Davis being the guy who ultimately wins out that job. Charlie Kohler, extra depth. Isaiah Likely had some meaningful football last year. And then Tyler Batty. I wish that was his name, but I think it's Beatty. But Batty would be a great running back last name. But yeah, this is an A. This is an A for Baltimore. I love this draft class a year ago, and I still love it right now. And I think long-term, a lot of those guys can become key fixtures and key starters for them moving forward. Then we get to the Bills. Kyer Elam, they moved up a couple spots to get Elam, which I liked that pick at the time. Cook was a solid value, and they needed another running back there. Khalil Shakir in the 5th round, I still think is great value. We won't talk about Matt Araiza. Christian Benford, with a year's time, that looks like one of the best value 6th-round picks that there was in this year's class. So if memory serves, I gave this Bills draft a B, and I'm going to stick there because I did like Kyer Elam a ton as a prospect. Not necessarily the best fit for that zone-heavy defense, but needed a corner. They drafted a guy with size and a ton of speed and kind of had those traits that you need, and then hopefully they can develop him into someone who's more of a scheme fit. I think Cook takes over as the lead back this year, and then Shakir, hopefully they change his role, give him more yak upside and give him working underneath, and they just need someone else who can reliably get open that's not Stephon Diggs. And I think Shakir has the skill set. Granted, it'd be a lot of underneath stuff and over the middle of the field, that 0 to 10 yard range, but that plus his yak ability I think could be really tapped into this year for Buffalo. So again, I'll give him a B. Then we get to Carolina and Ikem Ekwonu, man. First week of the season, this looked like, oh, yikes, this 6th overall pick, this is not looking great. But then by the year's end, it's like, dude, he might be the best tackle of this year's class. Like him and Charles Cross both looked fantastic. So love how that pick ultimately ended up kind of turning into. Matt Corral, yep, he's not starting. So I'm sorry, buddy. And then even the rest of those picks, maybe Cade Mays could eventually become a starter post like Austin Corbett. But yeah, this comes down to Akim Ekwonu. So didn't have a second rounder. Corral's not going to be a starter for them. Brandon Smith's a really twitchy linebacker, but they got Shaq Thompson back. They got Frankie Louvu, breaking on the scene last year. So I don't know if he'll be a huge, piece moving forward long term. But I got to give him at least a B- because of Akim Ekwonu. But outside of Akim Ekwonu, there really isn't much in this draft class to hang your hat on. Then we get to the Bears. Kyler Gordon, especially now, is someone who's probably moving to the nickel after they draft Tyreek Stevenson and Terrell Smith, for that matter, in the 23 draft class. I kind of like Kyler Gordon and his athleticism and fluidity in the nickel, so I like that a ton. Jaquan Brisker is a twitched up athlete. I love the value of him as a second rounder. Wasn't crazy about Velus Jones, but also with a year's worth of time, Braxton Jones looks like a great steal as a fifth rounder and someone they're planning on starting going into year 2. And then, not a whole lot to talk about the rest of the way. Maybe Zach Thomas is a fine swing tackle moving forward. Dominique Robinson, maybe there's some potential there because this team needs edge help. So maybe Robinson takes a step forward in year 2. But love the athleticism of those first two, secondary picks, Gordon and Brisker. And then Braxton Jones looks like a pretty solid value selection. So I'll give the Bears a B for their 2022 draft class. I think they got some solid pieces there and a really good value with Jones in the 5th. Next, Cincinnati, and man, I love the way the Bengals have been drafting, in the Joe Burrow era. They just do a great job of addressing immediate needs while also future-proofing the roster. Case in point with these first 2 picks. Dax Hill, that's your Jesse Bates replacement. Cam Taylor-Britt as some corner insurance / he could play a little bit of maybe, nickel corner. I could ultimately see Cam Taylor-Britt being like the Mike Hilton replacement. Keep him close to the line of scrimmage, take advantage of his willingness to tackle and his hard-hitting ability, and, still let him play corner because he's a solid coverage player as well. And then Cordell Volson could have a bigger role this year at left guard. We'll see if he can beat out Jackson Carman for that interior spot. So, and you look at the Bengals situation now, if they didn't go Dax Hill and Cam Taylor-Britt, if they didn't future-proof those positions, how would we be looking at that Bengals secondary? I think there'd be a lot of question marks about that unit, and maybe that would be a lot of people's hesitation to buy in to the Bengals this upcoming season. So, I'll go B+. I can't go quite A range because after Hill and Britt and Volson, there's not a whole lot to write home about. But especially those first 2 picks, I think did a lot to future-proof that secondary. The Browns, so another year where the Browns don't have like a first-round pick, so they're getting 2 third-rounders, just like we saw this past year. And honestly, you look at these first 2 picks, and I kind of like them a ton. Martin Emerson ultimately really worked out. He goes by MJ Emerson now, and I mean, he's the guy that's kind of stirred up the rumors of Greg Newsome reportedly asking for a trade because he ultimately earned out that spot, beating out a first rounder from the draft the year prior. And even Alex Wright, I don't mind that as an edge, developmental piece. Now they also have Ogbenai Okoronkwo and some of the other pieces they've added across the defensive line. It's developmental pieces like an Isaiah McGuire from this year's draft. So they have a couple of guys kind of waiting the wings that could eventually become starters, Wright being one of them, McGuire being the other. David Bell, I didn't hate that pick, but he was very unproductive in year 1. But maybe they get more out of him. Perion Winfrey feels like a guy that's not going to work himself too big into the rotation behind Siaki Ika and Dalvin Tomlinson. And then Jerome Ford, I actually think that's kind of an intriguing pick, and especially post Kareem Hunt, can he become that number 2 running back? I wouldn't rule that out whatsoever. So, especially with the hit of Martin Emerson, I think I gotta go. I'll go B, because outside of Emerson, the rest of it's kind of like, yeah, it's okay, it's fine, with the exception of maybe Jerome Ford becoming a really solid contributor. But still, Martin Emerson in the 3rd round, that single-handedly alone almost made me think B+. But when it's just Emerson, I'll leave it at a B. Cowboys, Tyler Smith, I thought was a really good player, especially with, a couple games of experience. I think he really started to hit his stride, and he was kind of dealt a unfortuitous, card, because he was supposed to play guard and then move to tackle, but pretty much immediately had to move to tackle after, all preseason getting ready at guard. So Sam Williams also, I think, is a solid player. Jalen Tolbert was really quiet his rookie year. Hopefully they get more out of him this upcoming year, but Tolbert's not looking like the greatest of 3rd-round picks. Jake Ferguson might be their starting tight end this year. Him and Luke Schoonmaker plus Peyton Hendershot, we'll figure that out. Deron Bland proved to be a great value as a 5th-rounder, and him as their nickel this year. I'm loving the idea of that. And then Damone Clark was another one of those guys where it's like, don't forget, injuries kind of pushed him to day 3, and I was shocked that he ended up being a 5th-round pick. And then I'm trying to think of who the Cowboys drafted the year before that as a 4th-rounder. Jabril Cox, LSU linebacker that somehow fell the 3rd day of the draft, and Cowboys scooped him up in the 4th round. So they love these 5th round or these day 3 linebackers from LSU. I think between Cox and Clark, one of those two is probably going to be at least a solid starter next to Leighton Vander Esch. So, yeah, I think this is a solid draft, especially with Tyler Smith being a guy who could hit the ground running, which I don't think a lot of people were anticipating out of him. Sam Williams, solid player in the rotation. Ferguson could be a competent starter. Bland's a big hit. I'll go B+ here for Dallas. I think there's just a lot of depth, and I always love Dallas draft classes that focus on just BPA versus like we need to fill the spot. Like this past year's class, it was like we kind of needed D tackles. So let's draft Mozzie Smith. We need a tight end. So let's draft Luke Schoonmaker. We need another linebacker. So let's draft DeMarvin Overshown, who I like Overshown, but it felt like they were focusing on the positions they needed to address versus like the year they drafted CeeDee Lamb. They were just like, hey, why is this guy still here? He's too good of a football player. Let's draft him. And then same kind of stuff played out here, maybe with the exception of Tyler Smith because offensive line was a need they needed to address. Anyways, tangent aside, let's talk about the Denver Broncos. Nick Bonito, didn't think that was a bad way for them to start off their draft. Damari Mathis, I'm kind of looking for them to find a replacement, but they didn't ultimately draft one, so it may be his starting job, so we'll get to see, and this upcoming year will be a good gauge for where this grade will ultimately kind of change long term. Greg Dulcich, good athletic tight end, didn't hate that pick whatsoever. And then any day 3 sleepers, not that we know of yet, at least. But, Benito, solid. Dulcich, didn't hate that. Mathis, we'll have to kind of wait and see. But I'll give it a C. I liked Benito a good bit coming out of Oklahoma, and that kind of saves the grade here for Denver. Next is the Detroit Lions. They have Aiden Hutchinson fall into their lap. Jamison Williams, they move up 20 spots to go get him, but I didn't mind it whatsoever because wide receiver, one of the highest position value, or one of the highest positions of value you can target. So they did a number 1 wide receiver. Williams, I think, has that potential. Pascal, Kirby Joseph, that's a big win because a lot of their turnover luck and progression in the right direction was Kirby Joseph down the stretch last year. Malcolm Rodriguez, an absolute steal of the draft. James Houston, a great story. 6th rounder, becomes an awesome DPR. Brad Holmes, you son of a bitch, I gotta give it an A. I mean, to me, he's one of the best GMs in football, and him and then Brandon Beane, feels like every move doesn't have to be a home run, but every move just kind of makes sense. With the exception of maybe the first round, because again, Holmes kind of got a lot of flack there, including for myself. Weren't high position value of targets, but that being said, I do think they made their roster better, and those are 2 guys that will come with a lot of production right away. But that first round aside, the entire draft was a really solid one. And again, every move that Holmes and Bean make just feels like, man, that's a smart move. That's a smart move. That's moving the needle ever so slightly in the right direction. And that process just continues to build on itself. And that's why the Bills in 2 years after hiring Brandon Beane were competitive. And that's why the Lions 2 years after hiring Brad Holmes might be the best team in that division. So love those 2 guys and the work that they've done for their respective squads. All right, next up, the Green Bay Packers. This was the Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt first round. So, this was, 2 and then 3 consecutive Georgia Bulldogs taken in the first round for the Green Bay Packers. Christian Watson shined a lot down the stretch last year, showcased his big playability. Sean Ryan, we haven't gotten to see a whole lot of him on the field yet, but wouldn't be surprised if he becomes a starter on the inside. Romeo Doubs is such a route-running assassin, but just somehow drops the most undroppable passes, so hopefully his hands get better in year 2. Zach Tom, I think, could eventually become a starter for them. I love this team's day 3 because it was Doubs, Tom, and Abare, who I thought could have been a 2nd to 3rd round guy. Even Jonathan Ford, I was intrigued by that. Rasheed Walker as a potential right tackle of the future. We haven't gotten to see a whole lot of Walker, and it feels like it's Zach Tom's job to lose, really. They also bring back Josh Yman. So we'll see what ultimately happens there at tackle, but man, I love the depth that they added here while also addressing inside linebacker and interior defensive line, where I know Walker and Wyatt had some, they had the trainer incident there in week 18, and that wasn't always a great look, but when those guys were, playing a good brand of football, like when those guys were rolling week 12 to week 17, those guys were really, really good, and big parts of why that Packers defense really picked it up down the stretch last year. Plus Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs figure to be the 1-2 target getters this upcoming season for Green Bay. So yeah, I got to give them an A. I love this Green Bay Packers draft. From start to finish, I think they addressed needs, but also added a ton of depth throughout this 22 draft. Then we get to the Houston Texans. Derek Stingley Jr., hoping he looks better in year 2, but I still believe in the talent and the potential that's there with DSJ. Kenyon Green looked rough in year 1, but also hopefully a guy that gets better in year 2, and I think there's a reason to buy into that. Jalen Petrie was a playmaker, turnover machine, needs to clean up the tackling, but I love the playmaking ability. John Mechie III didn't get to see him last year because of leukemia, but now he's healthy and practicing, so I'm excited to see him potentially as that slot wide receiver. Christian Harris, I'm interested to see what they can do with him. D'Amico Ryans, they also draft Henry To'oTo'o, but I actually like Harris more as a prospect than To'oTo'o, but that's just me. Dameon Pierce, big win as a day 3 pick, and he's really the only day 3 pick worth noting, and I think Dameon Pierce could easily be that, bell cow running back of the future. So I still really like this draft class. I'll go, it's teetering on the line between B and B plus. I'll go B plus. I'm buying in the potential of what Kenyon Green could be as a starting left guard and what Derek Stingley Jr. should be as that number one corner. So I'll go B plus for Houston. I think this was a solid draft for Caserio, and nobody's really talking about it, but I think he did a good job. Then we get to the Colts, no first rounder, but Alec Pierce, Jelani Woods is totally like a Chris Ballard type of tight end, so I love that. Bernard Ryman, who I think played some good football down the stretch last year, and I feel confident about him going into year two as their starting tackle. Nick Cross, because this was an offseason where they lost one of their starting safeties, and Kari Willis retiring at like 26, so needed to find a replacement. I think Nick Cross was good value, and then not much else to really talk about here. Maybe Rodney Thomas is another one of those safeties that gets a bigger and bigger role with time. But yeah, I think this was an okay class. I like Ryman, so I'll go B minus. I think it's solid, nothing too crazy. But especially Ryman here in year two, he could single-handedly change this grade when we do this in another year's time. Jags, they take Trayvon Walker at number 1 overall. Not a pick that I would have made, but nonetheless, I respect them sticking to their board and sticking to their process. We'll tell with time. Devin Lloyd looked really good early on, but really tapered off down the stretch and was even kind of benched by Chad Muma down the rest of the season and kind of moving into the postseason. So that inside linebacker situation is one to keep your eye on. Luke Fortner does figure to be a future starter there at center long term. So don't think a bad class. I'll give it a C right now. Drafting 2 inside linebackers with your first 4 picks is not necessarily maximizing position value. Walker is a natural work in progress, so it's really hard to grade that. And then Fortner is fine. He's okay. First pick of the 3rd round. I didn't mind that value at the time. So, I'll give him a C there for Jacksonville. Good, but not great. Just kind of meh, middle of the ground. Then we get to Kansas City. They took Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis in the first round. So their draft started out on such a strong note. I was like, oh, McDuffie, I love that as their Honey Badger replacement. Karlaftis, that's right. They needed to add edge. Sky Moore, oh my gosh. Sky Moore kind of let me down that first year. I was really high on Sky Moore. He was one of the top 6 wide receivers for me in last year's class. Really big fan of what he was at Western Michigan. But, now I'm really kind of worried because we often see these wide receivers who start out on like punt team and they start getting fumble issues. And then that kind of plagues the rest of their career. And Sky Moore really struggled with the special teams component of his role. And had some costly fumbles, including that Colts game, which was a bewildering loss for Kansas City. And Sky Moore was kind of at the center of it. So I'm hoping he kind of regains that confidence, puts all that beside him, and then gets better here in year 2. Brian Cook looks like a solid ad, especially considering you lose Juan Thornhill. That was future-proofing the position. Leo Chenal is definitely 100% a Spagnuolo type of linebacker, especially in blitzing situations. Those 3rd and longs, bringing some heat. I think Chenal is still a good fit. Excited to see what they do with him in year 2. Darian Kennard, it doesn't look like he's going to be starting at tackle, but I thought, depending on what happened in free agency, he could be someone who does that. But now it kind of feels like he's like a long-term Joe Thuney replacement who knows how much longer he's in Kansas City. He's making a lot of money. He could eventually become a cap casualty. And then Isaiah Pacheco. We talked about him so much in the Chiefs Super Bowl run last year. Became more and more efficient as a runner. Became more involved in the pass game too. And I think that was a good addition to his game and the role that they were asking him to fill. And, kind of case in point where, there are running backs that should go in the first round. Like, I think Bijan is worth going in the first round, but the other side of that coin is we can get Pacheco in the 7th round and win a Super Bowl. Granted, the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, and that situation's great. I hear you. It's not just adding Pacheco to any roster, but that's the process. Like, you can find a competent running back. So, loved, once again, to use this word, I love the process that Kansas City had here. They go corner, edge, wide receiver, high position value, high position value, high position value, and they address those other positions thereafter, like Cook at safety and then Pacheco with running back in the 7th. So, yeah, got to give it an A. I still love this draft class, and I think Karlaftis gets that much better this year. I think McDuffie, as long as he's healthy, gets that much better in year 2, and I think Brian Cook's stepping into a big role replacing Juan Thornhill. Next is the Chargers. Zion Johnson, really like that pick. Plus, you throw in Jamari Sawyer, who was a huge reason why the Chargers almost sniffed the postseason, right? Like, he was filling in for Rashawn Slater, and that is no easy job to do. Isaiah Spiller, I don't really know how much he's going to have to contribute this year. JT Woods, he might actually, especially with him moving on from Nasir Adderley. Like, who knows? JT Woods might be that guy stepping into that role. And then for the rest of the day 3 picks, nothing really crazy to talk about. Really, it's the guards, Zion Johnson and Jamari Sawyer, that boost up this grade. And then maybe we'll see what JT Woods is. I'll give the Chargers a B, especially because Zion Johnson's position flexibility, and Jamari Sawyer, again, huge filling in at left tackle last year. Now he gets to play guard. I think he'll be that much better. Maybe we ultimately see him play at right tackle if Trey Pipkins does not work out. Then we get the Rams here. First pick was Logan Bruss. They didn't have a first or second rounder, so it's really tough to grade these. Kyron Williams was fine last year. I kind of have more expectations. Darion Kendrick is slotted to be a starting corner right now for the Rams, but like a 4.7, 4.8, 40. Yeah, I don't know how much that's really going to play at the next level. And then, really not much else to talk about. Maybe Russ Yeast, but yeah, even that, I'm not banking on him becoming a guy that they lean on this year. And I think there's a reason they had 14 draft selections. I think, they even look at this 2022 class and they're like, yeah, not a whole lot of these guys are helping us with our immediate needs. So 14 selections in 2023 to try to patch up those holes. So, not the best draft class. I got to give it a D for the Rams here. Sorry, we'll see what Bruss does in year 2, and Kyron Williams might get a bigger role, but as I'm looking at it right now, not a whole lot to write home about, so I'll give him a D. Let me get to the Raiders. Dylan Parham was their first pick, so another team that didn't pick till the third round. But Parham, his position flexibility, it's hard not to imagine him being a starter long term for the Raiders. Zamir White could be, a potential replacement to Josh Jacobs. Didn't get a whole lot of him in year 1. Thayer Munford, I don't mind that as some guard tackle flexibility. And Matthew Butler's also an interesting potential D tackle there in the mix. They also draft Byron Young out of Alabama this year. I could see a world where Butler and Young, especially on run downs, early down situations, are the starting tandem there to plug the run, where the Raiders have been pretty weak for some time now. So again, it's tough to grade this. I have to kind of grade it on a curve because there's no first or second rounder. I'll go C. Yeah, I'll go C-. I like Parham, but the rest of it, we're kind of forcing this draft class into roles, which I don't know for sure if they're going to end up taking or be the guys for. Then we get to Miami, only a 4-pick class, just like they had this year. That's kind of funny how that's worked out back-to-back years. Channing Tindall, I thought was an interesting, player, high-end athlete coming from Georgia. Could they mold them behind Jerome Baker? But now with the signing of David Long Jr., I think Tindall is kind of just a really awesome athlete to have on special teams. And then the rest of the way, Skylar Thompson, got to see him a little bit last year, but he looks like a backup quarterback in the making. So not a whole lot to write home about there for Miami. Again, I had to put it on a little bit of a curve, excuse me. I'll go D. Yeah, there's still not much to like here about Miami, and their 4-player class this year, at least is headlined by Cam Smith and Devon Achane. This 4-player class, I don't know if any of these guys eventually even become starters for Miami. Then we get to Minnesota. Lewis Cine had that crazy injury in London, so we didn't get to see him fully healthy. Andrew Booth Jr. was also battling injuries. Ed Ingram, I didn't mind some additional interior offensive line depth, and who knows, we could see him this year. Brian Asamoah might have a big role ahead of him. Had this killer wingspan and some solid athletic testing, so for a team that needs to get faster in the middle of the field, I think Asamoah could be that guy. Caleb Evans might be starting at corner this year on the outside. We'll see. I'm a big Ty Chandler fan. I would love to see that backfield be led by McBride, who they got in the 7th round this year, plus Ty Chandler from the 5th round last year. And then Jalen Naylor right now, I think was slotted to be a starter at wide receiver, but then they draft Jordan Addison. So it does look like Naylor's going to end up being wide receiver 4 maybe, which still I don't think it's a bad role for him, and they could get some solid value out of this draft class with a day 3 guy becoming your 4th wide receiver and a fill-in dude. I don't mind that whatsoever. Like Chandler. Intrigued by Evans, wasn't crazy about him coming out. And then Asamoah might be someone they're leaning on pretty heavily this year, as well as Lewis Cine. So not a bad class by any stretch. I'll go B-. I think it's solid, and there's some potential for it to get even better when we regrade it another year's time. Then we get to New England. Cole Strange, that was the shocking pick of the first round last year, and that's why we saw so many videos this draft cycle. Who could be this year's Cole Strange? So definitely a bit of a head scratcher. Tyquan Thornton was too. Like, that was a second rounder I don't think anybody saw coming. He was definitely more of a late 3rd, kind of a day 3 guy in my books. Marcus Jones, I think, could be a crazy good nickel corner. Hopefully they give him that role this year. Jack Jones has a ton of surplus value with where they got him in the 4th round. He gave up some big plays last year. Pierre Strong, I'd be interested to see if he works himself into the mix. Maybe even ends up being RB2 over James Robinson, who they brought in free agency, but I could ultimately see them giving Pierre Strong some more looks there. I don't know. The Patriots are always kind of tough to anticipate. Got to see Zappia last year. He was fine. Looks like a decent backup option, maybe fill-in starter for New England, but definitely not the most crazy class. I'll give it a C flat. Zappy, it's always good to have that backup quarterback. He could be like the next Brian Hoyer for Bill Belichick, keep him in New England for like 2 decades. Strange, I think, could be a solid starter. Thornton adds speed. Jones, I think, could be a competent starter. Both Jones, really, at the cornerback spot. Marcus and Jack, I think, could be solid starters for them, but they're going to fall behind Christian Gonzalez in regards to upside. So, good, it's fine. C. Feels about right for New England in their 22 draft class. New Orleans, Chris Olave, he was my wide receiver 4 in this draft class because I kind of saw him as a 1B versus the other 3 guys ahead of him being potentially 1As. I think Olave proved me wrong last year. I really do, which I'm happy to be wrong about because I love Chris Olave as a player. But without Michael Thomas, he was their go-to guy. So yeah, that's looking like an absolute win. They did have to trade up to get him, so do take that into account here. Trevor Penning, another part of another trade, and then hopefully we get to actually see him, kind of for the full season and see what he looks like here in year 2. High potential guy, but also came with probably one of the lower floors of the tackle class in 22. And then Alontae Taylor I wasn't crazy about, but I know he had some fans and. Him plus Paulson Adebo from the year before. It's just like, hey, which of these day 2 guys can be good enough opposite of Marshawn Lattimore? So I didn't hate that process by any stretch, and then the other guys aren't really worth talking about here. So, man, Chris Olave really saves the grade here. And then Penning and his potential, I'll go with a B-, and a lot of that is Chris Olave. And then when we do this in another year's time, it could even go up to a B+ if Penning looks like a guy they can lean on as a starter long term. Then we get to the Giants. I mean, these first 2 picks, I know Evan Neal wasn't crazy, and even Kayvon Thibodeau was slow to start, but just give them more than a year. Thibodeau plus Neal, I think, are going to be more than plus-level starters at their respective positions. So starting out on a strong note, really excited to see Wan'Dale Robinson in the slot, and he could be another guy who helps move this offense in the right direction. Daniel Jones likes throwing over the middle of the field, so I could see Robinson being a sneaky fantasy guy this year you want to draft and stash. Josh Azudu, hopefully he takes a step forward at left guard this year because, I think they can get better there, but if Azudu figures it out, they get John Michael Schmitz in the second in the 23 class. Okay, that offensive line's looking pretty solid. Cordell Flott, not a bad ad. I didn't mind them taking a shot on him in the 3rd round last year. Daniel Bellinger was actually better than I anticipated, and now he's the tight end 2 behind Waller. Don't hate that. And then anybody else here? Darren Beavers was actually a guy as a 6th rounder I was actually intrigued by, so excited to see what they do with him this upcoming season. So, I mean, Thibodeau and Neal, it's kind of hard not to give this at least an A. Wan'Dale Robinson, I'll go A- here for the Giants because, after those top 3, we'll see. Uzudo is right now scheduled to be a starter, so it could even boost up their grade a little bit more, but I'll give the Giants an A-. Then we get to the Jets. Sauce Gardner, I mean, to me, a little spoiler alert, when we get to the redraft, this is going to be the guy who goes number 1 overall, because, to me, not even close. The best rookie after 1 year of this 2022 draft class. And then that's saying something because Garrett Wilson might be the 2nd best rookie to come out of the 2022 draft class, and he was the next pick. Didn't get to see a whole lot of Jermaine Johnson, but yeah, I liked him as a 1st rounder, but not as a top 4, pick, which there was a lot of rumblings they might take him instead of Sauce Gardner at 4. I had a ton of Jets fans telling me there's no way we're going to take corner, and, I think you're happy with the results. But I'm excited to see what they do with Jermaine Johnson, especially if they move John Franklin Myers, maybe give him some more snaps on the inside. Get to see Jermaine Johnson, his size and length, plus Will McDonald, a lot of the same kind of pluses. Feels like a defense starting to fully take shape and into the form that Robert Saleh wants it to be. Breece Hall looked like he was going to be Offensive Rookie of the Year until he got hurt. So, yeah, that's a really good value add. They did have to move up to get him, which you don't love. Same thing with Jermaine Johnson. But at least you could say we traded up for an edge, higher position value. You can kind of build an argument there. Jeremy Ruckert, don't mind that as a tight end. Could see him becoming a starting a tight end option. You got 2 more years of Conklin and Uzama, but after this upcoming season, they become very cuttable contracts. Max Mitchell, we look at the value he's brought as a swing tackle at worst this year. He might even end up being the starting right tackle for all we know. So that's a big time win there for a 4th round pick. So yeah, got to give the Jets an A. I mean, Sauce Gardner alone makes this kind of something that's locked into an A because I love Sauce Gardner and already one of the best corners in football, top 5, top 10 territory in my books. So yeah, easy A to give out to the Jets there. Next is Philadelphia. They move up and get Jordan Davis. It was a small move up, so nothing really too much to talk about there, and it won't skew the grade a whole lot. Cam Jurgens, I think works best as a center only. I know there's been talks about him playing guard, but I'd prefer him at center only. Replace Jason Kelce, keep a strength of strength. Really excited to see what Nakobe Dean looks like in this, Georgia defense that's moved on to the NFL. Jalen Carter and Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis and Nolan Smith this year. Keely Ringo, the list goes on and on and on and on. But I think Nakobe Dean, especially considering that might be the weakest spot on the Eagles roster right now, linebacker, Nakobe Dean might have a ton of production this year, which will make this grade look even better. And then Grant Calcaterra is actually an interesting 6th round pick and tight end 2 for this roster, and I think he looked okay last year with the little bit we got to see him. I gotta go B+. Davis didn't play a huge role last year, but I think he gets even better in year 2. Jurgens is a future starter, and I think he'll be able to carry the torch from Jason Kelce, so I am projecting a little bit there, assuming that he works out. And then Nakobe Dean, I am so pumped to see what he looks like this upcoming year because he was a stud at Georgia. So B+ there for Philadelphia. Pittsburgh, Kenny Pickett, I've kind of talked about this in prior videos, and maybe you were subscribed to the channel prior to my laptop dying right up to the 2022 NFL draft, so that was a bummer. But Kenny Pickett wasn't somebody I really loved. He was my QB4. I preferred Ritter if you were going to go like NFL ready, and I was kind of anticipating Pittsburgh might do that, but Pickett worked out better, and I think he looked better each and every week he was the starter, and especially post-bye week. I think the Steelers offense really started to figure it out, and not that I'm crazy about Matt Canada now, and I'm not believing that he's going to, be an awesome, great offensive coordinator. I don't think you really can change that much from what we've seen over the last couple of years, but it did feel like he took steps in the right direction, and if we get more targets to George Pickens this year, I think he could ultimately continue to earn himself the job year over year, kind of like a one-year contract basis. But Pickett plus Pickens, those first two picks, that's hopefully the identity of the Steelers offense moving forward, because I think Pickens can be a 1, and Pickett was better than I anticipated. So now I actually have hope with him being our future franchise quarterback. It's Marvin Leal, kind of a tweener, and kind of feels like he's lost a little bit of a role with Larry Ogunjobi coming back. Plus you draft Keanu Benn, who's going to be more of a nose tackle, but I do wonder how big of a role Leal earns. Calvin Austin, especially with the trade for Allen Robinson, it feels like Deontay Johnson's going to move into the slot, so it feels like Calvin Austin's going to be kind of a gadget player only. Maybe they give him some running back snaps too. I'd be interested by that. Setting up some screens with him, lining up at the backfield. I think there's a lot of fun that could be had there with Calvin Austin and his skill set. But I do wonder if not for the Robinson trade, what would he have looked like as a wide receiver 3? Like if he was one of your big, if he was one of those names in that wide receiver trio, how much production can you get out of Austin? Because I am really curious, because I liked him a ton. I thought they got good value getting him in the 4th round. Connor Hayward, he's fine. He's okay. He's moving to fullback now, so, whatever. And then Mark Robinson and the rest of the day 3 picks aren't really worth talking about here. So Pickett, Pickens, and then the rest of the way. This is I'll go B+, and a lot of that, honestly, is carried by George Pickens. I think George Pickens can be an absolute freak, so hopefully he's averaging at least 8 targets a game next year, because there were way too many games last season where Pickens was finishing contests with somewhere between 3 and 5 targets, and that should be against the law in Pittsburgh, if I'm honest. Then we get to Seattle, and this was one of the best draft classes I've seen during my lifetime. Charles Cross, stud, and he was my OT1, so I loved the value they got with him at 9. Boye Mafe, loved his ability to take that first step and become an immediate DPR contributor. You had a role for him right away while being able to buy some time and grow him and develop him into something more than just pin your ears back, win with speed. Ken Walker, absolute steal when it comes to value. Abe Lucas, starting right tackle from week 1, absolute steal for value. Kobe Bryant, starting outside corner. Now it looks like he's going to move inside of the slot with Witherspoon coming in, or maybe they play Witherspoon in the nickel when they go to those nickel and dime sets, and it's Kobe Bryant on the outside because he's a little bit bigger at 6'1", 195 pounds. And then Tariq Woolen, candidate for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Absolute size, speed freak, and then it actually looked a whole lot better in year 1 than a lot of people were anticipating. And then Bo Melton, didn't hate that whatsoever. So yeah, A. This is an A for Seattle. Those first 6 picks are insane. Charles Cross, that's an A grade. Boye Mafe, that's a B to a B+. Ken Walker, that's a B+ to an A-. Lucas, that's probably an A, especially with hindsight. Kobe Bryant at the time, I probably gave that a B. Tariq Woolen, I gave that an A- just because let's see what it turns into. And then with hindsight, it's an A, a B, an A, a B, and an A. So yeah, got to give Seattle an A here, just off those first 6 picks alone. San Francisco is next up, and only a handful of teams left to talk about here in the 2022 regrade. San Francisco adds Drake Jackson. Hope we get to see more of him on the field in year 2, because I did believe in him a ton coming out of USC and thought maybe even he could be a fringe first rounder, but I think he landed in a good spot for him to fully develop his skill set. Tyrion Davis-Price, leave it to the Shanahans and their disciples. They're going to draft a running back somewhere on day 2. And I actually do think Tyrion Davis-Price is a good fit for that scheme, but he's behind Elijah Mitchell. He's behind Christian McCaffrey. Both those guys have battled injuries, so maybe we get to see more of TDP this year. Danny Gray's actually a great fit for that offense. And, you get the 5th-year option of Brandon Ayuk. I could easily see Danny Gray becoming the eventual replacement for Brandon Ayuk. So didn't hate that pick whatsoever. Spencer Burford, who's been able to move inside and play some guard. Wasn't great his first year, but I don't think it was a bad starting place for a rookie, and hopefully he gets better and better with some more time. And then, of course, you got to talk about Brock Purdy, the 7th-round pick that ultimately took the 49ers to the NFC Championship game, and seems to be the inline starter, assuming he comes back from the surgery in time to be starting week 1. So that pick alone, it's kind of hard not to give him an A, especially when you consider like the bottom 2 players of salary cap or your bottom 2 salaries don't count against the salary cap. So technically, San Francisco's assuming Purdy's the starter. they're going to have their starting quarterback not counting against the salary cap. That is insane. So kind of want to give it an A for that alone, but I also like Burford. I think Gray could be an eventual starter, and Drake Jackson as well. So I'll go B+. And I also feel like I owe it to San Francisco fans. I've talked so much shit about your 2023 class, so let's go ahead and boost up the grade for the 22 class. I'll give it a B+. Tampa Bay is the next team to talk about. Logan Hall, I'm really interested to see what his role looks like. He's a bit of a tweener, but you add Kalijah Cansey, you sign Greg Gaines. Feels like Hall's going to have to move outside of the edge, but they also added some edge there. And yesterday I said Yaya Diaby to the Jags. I just mocked that a ton to where I thought that had happened. He went to Tampa Bay, so apologies for my misspeaking there. But that's another athletic edge. So again, where does Logan Hall fit in the mix here? Luke Gedeke, he sounds like he's moving to right tackle with Tristan Wirfs flipping over to the left side. So TBD there for Gedeke, but I thought he should have been a tackle to start with. So I'm actually kind of excited to see what he looks like. Rashad White, solid, nothing crazy through year one, but could certainly get better in year two. K. Dotton, yeah, fine, competent, solid starting option there. And then the rest of the guys, no one else really to talk about. So yeah, I think this is a fine, it's okay, C+, it's good enough, address some, major needs and some high position value, targets at D edge, defensive line, edge, and then tackle, so not a bad class whatsoever, put together by Jason Light. Then we get to Tennessee, Treylon Burks. We'll have to see what he looks like. He had some flashes through year one, but injuries kind of prevented us from seeing it on a bigger sample size. Roger McCreary had some good games, but sometimes also the arm length really came into play, and he got kind of bodied and worked by bigger and stronger guys. So some good, some bad there for McCreary. Nicholas Petit-Frere, hopefully he's better in year two. I think he could stick. Maybe the starting right tackle for this team. Malik Willis feels like they're moving on from him already, so that's unfortunate. Hassan Haskins, actually an intriguing, Derrick Henry replacement, but so is Tajay Spears that they just drafted. So interested to see what that, future running back position looks like for Tennessee. Chikakonkwo, one of the better value picks. I'm actually really excited to see if Kyle Phillips can earn that starting slot position, because if so, I think he'd be a really solid starter there, and potentially a really good fantasy guy, because it's him and Treylon Burks really just kind of lead the way in target share. So Chikakonkwo, Kyle Phillips, they kind of save the grade here. Haskins, I'm intrigued by. I'll go with a B. I still have faith in Burks and Petit-Frere, plus those day three guys and Okonkwo and Phillips figuring to be starters right now for that Tennessee offense who needs pass catchers. Not a bad draft class whatsoever. And it was the final one by John Robinson. So good job before he got fired. Next up, we get to Washington here to round out the video. John Dotson, better than I anticipated. Fidarian Mathis, I don't know how big of a role he's going to have, considering they're paying Jonathan Allen, they're paying Deron Payne, so TBD there. Brian Robinson Jr., solid starter, and then Sam Howell. This is going to be the one that ultimately changes the grade the most. How good does Sam Howell look in a full year of starting this upcoming season with Washington? And I also think Cole Turner's a sleeper guy for fantasy this year, because not a whole lot of tight end depth in general, but also we saw how big of a role that Travis Kelce played for that Bieniemy offense, obviously with Andy Reid also there. But if Bieniemy's looking for that tight end to lead the way and be that Travis Kelce type, maybe it's Cole Turner. Maybe, just maybe, worth drafting and stashing in fantasy football this upcoming season. So a bit of a TBD for those two fifth rounders, which makes it tough to grade here. But Dotson plus Brian Robinson got some good value out of those guys right away. I'll give it a C+. I feel like I'm being a little generous there, but I'll go C+ there for Washington. But guys, that is going to do it for my 2022 NFL Draft regrade. Let me hear your grades down below in the comment section. With a year's worth of time, maybe what team has had their grade changed the most? And also, what would you give your favorite team? A year worth of hindsight, what would you regrade their 2022 NFL Draft? Let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. But hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. Hit that like button if you did. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. And again, leave me your thoughts down below in the comment section. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.